So, what does emotional regulation look like? What are we aiming for exactly? First, it's emotional stability. I'm going to assume you sort of understand what stable means, a solid base that can withstand some pressure and does no return and break apart easily. But second, it's about resilience or being elastic and capable of change and rebound as the context requires. Now, I don't mean that an emotionally regulated person can just bounce back from just anything, but the person has emotional flexibility or resilience to tolerable stress. So, what defines tolerable stress? Well, from a physiological standpoint, pretty much anything that won't literally end your life. There may be a lot of situations that are highly uncomfortable, and you won't necessarily enjoy it, but you won't die. And a regulated brain and body responds in a way that reflects this. What made 2020's COVID pandemic so unique was that in the beginning, because it was a new and different experience that actually was life-threatening, it tripped a lot of humans into a level of fight or flight, even if they were emotionally centered and regulated. Once we had a little more understanding about protective measures, distances, and mode of contraction, people who had flexible emotional response ranges based closer to neutral calm were able to return there more easily, knowing that if protocols were adhered to, the likelihood of actual death was minimized. Healthcare workers, however, faced and still face possible exposure every day, making the experience a higher and very real potential life threat. So even those flexible clinicians with ranges that were centered closer to neutral calm, they still need to take extra measures to ensure self-care in order to perform well and stay healthy. But for practitioners whose nervous systems are dysregulated and synced more towards like high arousal, like I was, they've probably never experienced true restorative calm before. And I'm guessing with the intense working conditions of the last year or so, they're probably close to burning out by now. I also want to be clear that emotional self-regulation is not about always being in a positive mood or state, but more about moving in and out of emotion and not getting hung up in disruptive levels of emotion. Levels like prolonged anxiety or prolonged anger, sadness, or apathy. So, what does this regulated emotional range feel like? Well, I can really only honestly offer my own experience because everyone's experience is a bit different. But when I'm in my regulated emotional range, in my body, it feels like I'm operating in an open space or a sort of a grassy park in my mind. Everyday life and the unexpected stressors that go with it are still happening all around me. But within this mental, emotional open space, I'm calmer, kinder, living my life and doing my work, prioritizing more easily, staying focused and setting boundaries with more confidence. And there's a felt sense of ease, objectivity, or space between me and the unpredictable and imperfect world that surrounds me. If I do get pulled into something, I know how to get myself back more often, back to that calmer emotional center. And I can continue more peacefully with whatever I'm doing. Now, I'm still not perfect at doing this, and I practice a lot. But as the world does its thing and I'm interacting with it, I find myself more often operating from this calmer space of my widening and recentering emotional range. Now, the process of retraining your emotional response system also starts to give you a much greater variety of feeling labels to draw from at any given time. Now, remember, our feelings describe the emotional neurochemical response in our bodies in relation to a situation. But each neurochemical response can turn on in different amounts or in different combinations with other neurochemicals, which can give us slightly different body sensations depending on the scenario that it turns on in. which means as you learn to read your body sensations, you'll start to become more aware of the many shades of emotion that lay between what we call happy and sad, or anxious and depressed. This increased awareness of emotional variety is called emotional granularity. And developing it simply means that when you come home from work grumpy, you start to understand that it's more than just grumpy. You become more precisely aware of your mind, body, and emotional state. You start to understand the different, subtle body sensations that tell you that maybe you're actually feeling overwhelmed or confused, or maybe you're feeling frustrated, a bit inadequate, or anxious about not living up to your boss's expectations. These are much different experiences than merely the generic term of grumpy. So, why is developing this emotional precision so important? Because different feeling labels lead to different behaviors. For example, if you believe your mood is depressed because that's the only feeling word that you know to describe your low arousal experience, what might you do? Maybe nothing. What if instead what you were really experiencing was actually boredom, lack of interest, or a need for some variety in your life? Or what if what you were actually experiencing was calm, relaxed, or present, but it was so relatively unfamiliar to you that you just didn't recognize it? Any of those terms can describe a lack of nervous system activity, the absence of intense emotion, or relatively lower arousal. So, what would you do differently for each of those different feelings? A person may see many more ways to remedy boredom than they can see to remedy depression. Now, I'm not saying that boredom and depression, calm and relaxed, are exactly the same, but do you know the difference between how they feel in your body? Physiologically, all those examples I just gave all have very similar emotional neurochemical body responses. The difference between them may be the volume of the response or what other body chemical it's running with, in addition to the meaning, interpretation, or the feeling label that we have assigned to the situation in which it was activated. So, can you start to see how the more specific you can get about your emotional body response, the more options you may have for changing it if you want to? Noticing and getting to know your emotional body sensations is like cultivating a taste for fine food. When you love food and really appreciate a good meal, you pay more attention and you can pick out more details and flavor nuances and probably even distinguish between the different flavors, right? Maybe you can even name like specific spices just by the taste. The same can happen with your body sensations and feeling labels. You can get to know them so well that you can start to really identify what's happening in your mind and body instead of just generalizing it. Or worse yet, misinterpreting what's happening. I guess you could say it's like becoming an emotional connoisseur. What do you think? And believe me, don't worry about all this. We're not supposed to know all this stuff. Very few of us learned it as kids because, well, like I said, it's only been in the last 20 years or so that science has actually been able to look inside our brains and start to see how things work. And our parents were probably doing what they could with the limited experiences that they had. Okay, so let's review. The first step of emotional intelligence is about increasing awareness and becoming emotionally self-regulated. And self-regulation is about the ability to rebound back and flexibly operate within a range of moderate and varied emotions. There's nothing wrong with feelings of anxiety or sadness in and of themselves, but it's often the intensity, the frequency, and the relevance Oh, I gave that one away to our current environment that can become problematic. In other words, if you were running from someone chasing you with a gun, you definitely would want your fear, anxiety, and your emotional response system working full bore, right? It'd be pumping chemicals to your body to help you run. So that's a very relevant activation of adrenaline because your life is actually at stake. But if your fear-based emotions are running full on just because someone is arguing with you about your opinion or they voted for someone else in the last election, your stress response system is not running in a way that's relevant to your environment or running as it was designed to. So why are those examples not relevant? Because who someone votes for or someone's differing opinion, although you may feel uncomfortable around it and disagree, neither of those examples in that moment are life-threatening. Our brains and bodies just never learn to differentiate that. Do you see what I'm getting at? There's nothing wrong with the emotional response itself. It works just fine. It's just working or turned on in scenarios and in environments where it's not intended to be used. And that overuse is not only becoming polarizing and a conditioned habit, but over time, it's negatively impacting the health of our bodies. So when we experience centered and regulated emotion, and we're operating close to or in that more neutral range or window that we talked about, we don't get stuck or spend so much time in emotional activation, nervousness, anxiety, or hypervigilance on a day-to-day basis. And we don't get stuck or spend too much time in sadness, immobilization, or general shutdown either. We're in a fluid state of diverse feelings and emotions that are fairly comfortable and enjoyable most of the time. And everyday upsets, including other people's emotional upheavals, a moody boss or someone running late to a meeting, just doesn't throw us off balance so much. Does that sound good to anybody else? Sounds pretty good to me. I'll see you in the next video.